When you take a look at George R.R. Martin's discography, there is one work that really stands out. In 1980, 11 years before he began working on A Game of Thrones, George published a children's book. Now, he was able to sneak in some horrific fire burns and a subtextual sexual assault. It wouldn't be a George story without a little flavor. And actually, the unedited version is printed here in Dream Songs and is much more gruesome. But the Ice Dragon follows a girl named Adara who lives on a farm in the north. She befriends the titular creature even though everyone else is scared of him, because Adara is different. She's a child of winter. Sound familiar? The Ice Dragon takes place in almost a proto-Westeros, even though George Martin has confirmed it's completely separate from A Song of Ice and Fire. Macmillan Publishers is spreading fake news, and so is Amazon. Jeff Bezos, you are hereby on notice, you bald-headed oligarch, you tax-avoiding sewage spiller. Oh, hold on a minute. He's getting me a job in space. Thanks, Jeff. We're cool. This video is brought to you by my patrons. If you enjoy my channel, please consider joining at patreon.com/crusaderchris. I won't spoil the entirety of Ice Dragon in this video, but you should definitely read it. My copy is barely 100 pages long, and this is how many words are on each page. You can finish it in one sitting. The very first page of the Ice Dragon draws a link to the others. She was never quite sure whether it was the cold that brought the Ice Dragon or the Ice Dragon that brought the cold. In Book 3, Gren says, "They only come when it's cold." "Yes," said Sam, "but is it the cold that brings the whites, or the whites that bring the cold?" George is reusing the same question. What comes first, beast or cold? Old Nan is also repurposed from the Ice Dragon. Old Laura lives one farm over from Adara, and she tells stories from before anyone else was born. Adara was born during the worst freeze anyone can remember. She's called a winter child, like how Old Nan calls Bran a sweet summer child, and how George calls Shireen a summer child who has never known true cold. There is a winter child in the lore book, however, Princess Gale Targaryen, the 13th and final child of Jaehaerys and Alysanne, who had notably pale skin just like the winter child Adara. Winter is also getting longer and longer in The Ice Dragon, proving that George has been interested in irregular seasons for a very long time. Adara is said to be marked by winter. The cold had touched her and made her its own. Perhaps George expanded this concept for Bran. In Game of Thrones, he bears the mark of the others after the Night King grabs him mid-green-seeing session. Maybe the showrunners got this from George, and we'll see Bran get branded by the others somehow in The Winds of Winter. But George almost certainly repurposed this idea for the magic of weirwoods. Trees froze through to their slow, secret souls. This comes 4 years after A Song for Leah, in which there's a hive mind of alien blobs that envelop people into their bodies. So we can see the path George took to get to weirwood trees from his earlier work. Weirwoods being both a hive mind that can envelop a human, like Bloodraven, and being trees containing souls of dead greenseers. The Ice Dragon also has early pieces that would become part of Jon Snow's and Daenerys Targaryen stories. To the north of Adara's farm, there is a terrible war between the king and his enemy. When the enemy gains ground, it forces an exodus of all the folks living up there to flee south. There's also an enemy to the north in Ice and Fire, from which Jon must protect the wildlings by letting them flee south. And to the way north, there is the land of always winter. Same thing in the Ice Dragon. Soon her Ice Dragon would come for her, and she would ride on its back to the land of always winter, where great ice castles and cathedrals of snow stood eternally in endless fields of white, and the stillness and silence were all. Perhaps this is what Westeros' land of always winter looks like too. And speaking of riding dragons, both Adara and Daenerys ride their pals without harnesses or satchels, although Dany does have a whip. The practicalities of riding a dragon are something George cares about. You should have all this equipment, but Adara and Dany make do without. The two girls also have a similar sort of temperature tolerance. Adara is resistant to extreme cold, and Daenerys is resistant to extreme heat. Adara and her ice dragon is where George appears to lay the roots of dragon bonds in A Song of Ice and Fire. The ice dragon is able to find Adara hiding in a cave where he's never seen her before, just like how Drogon is able to find Dany in her moment of distress in Desnak's pit. The telepathic bond of a dragon and its human is central to George Martin's work, and probably traces back to Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Riders of Pern series, beginning in the 60s. The cold and ominous circumstances of Adara's birth are thought to have killed her mother, and Adara's father blames her for his wife's death. Whenever I touch her, I feel the chill, and I remember that it was for her that Beth had to die. George uses this flawed, cruel motif twice in Ice and Fire. Viserys blames Daenerys for their mother Rhaella's death, and Cersei and Tywin blame Tyrion for Joanna's death. In the novelette, the ice dragon fights a fire dragon. The ice dragon closed on it, wings screaming the secret song of winter, and a blast of flame met a blast of cold. George describes the ice dragon's icy breath as a long, smoking, blue-white stream of cold that was full of snow and stillness, and the end of all living things. At this point, the end of all living things sounds like the goal of the others as well. They appear to kill humans indiscriminately, picking off wildlings here and there as they please on Tormund's entire journey south to the Wall. If the others truly want to destroy humanity, they should harness the power of a dragon with icy breath that's the end of all living things. This is why I don't think it's crazy the Night King turned Viserion into a white in Game of Thrones. If you think about it, the only thing the others have to their advantage are numbers. Hordes of undead, probably much higher quantities than the number of humans opposing them. But the humans will have dragonglass weapons and arrows. We know dragonglass can kill an other because Sam the Slayer proved it, so it can probably kill the lesser whites as well. And George has set up the fact that Dragonstone contains tons and tons of obsidian to be mined. We think Valyrian steel can kill an other because Sam read about it in an old book. The book calls it dragon steel. That's 2 dragon-coated substances that are anathema to others. George wants us to associate the power of dragons, dragonglass, dragon steel, to set up Dany's actual dragons being used against the others as well. And we know regular old fire can kill a white because Jon Snow proved it back in Book 1. So perhaps magical dragon fire can kill the magical others. Although in Game of Thrones, the Night King took Drogon's fire blast like an absolute champ. Who knows if that came from George or not? I mean, there's obviously no Night King in the books, but the idea of others withstanding dragon flame and harnessing an ice dragon might have been George's. The ideas of the Sand Snakes and Stannis the Manus versus Ramsay were George's as well, and D&D fumbled big time. So let's humor me and say the others will have an ice dragon in the upcoming books. Where does it come from? I doubt they'll raise Viserion as a white because A, they'd have to kill him first, and the way Got did it was laughable, and B, I think all 3 of Dany's dragons will be ridden by humans, fulfilling the 3 heads of the dragon prophecy that takes up so much space in her chapters and in her own mind. Daenerys on Drogon, Jon Snow on Rhaegal, and IMO Tyrion on Viserion. But mayhaps the horn that Ghost finds in A Clash of Kings is the real Horn of Winter, or Joramun's horn, and is akin to the Dragonbinder horn that Euron found in Valyria. First of all, Mance Rayder claimed to have found the Horn of Winter in the Frostfangs, but Ygritte admitted earlier that they never found it, and I believe her. Mance is lying. And anyways, Melisandre burned that horn along with Rattleshirt. But Sam Tarly still has that old war horn from the Fist down at the Citadel with him. Perhaps that's the real Horn of Winter, and all Mance had was the horn of an oryx. Perhaps all the horns in A Song of Ice and Fire are used for the same magical purpose, to awaken dragons. Instead of waking giants, like legend claims the Horn of Winter can do, Euron will blow it and bring down part of the wall, and in doing so, awaken the ice dragon living beneath it. Alright, that theory was a little too on the rails. Let's get nuts. At the end of Book 1, Daenerys does a blood sacrifice, takes a nap in a big fire, and emerges with 3 newborn dragons. She burned Mirri Maz Duur alive, she smothered Khal Drogo with a pillow, and, this one's debatable, she subconsciously sacrificed her son Rhaego. Or at least, Dany agrees with me that's possible. So 3 deaths for 3 lives. How about it's rewind time, and we do an ice version instead of a fire version? Stannis is going to burn Shireen in the Winds of Winter. George said so. I've long believed that Jon will be resurrected as a consequence of this. He's the dragon, Rhaegar's son, that will be woken up from stone, Shireen's grayscale face. So maybe Jon will become a metaphorical ice dragon, as a Stark and a man of the North, just as Daenerys is a fire dragon. And it's a little interesting that George mentions either the ice dragon from Westerosi legend or the constellation ice dragon 6 times in Jon's chapters. Is he doing some word association to set us up for a reveal later on?
That's interesting.
If we want to have more fun, Stannis' blood sacrifice will awaken 2 lives, Jon and a literal ice dragon. Stannis will succeed in his quest of waking a dragon, but for 2 lives, there needs to be 2 deaths. Who will Stannis kill alongside Shireen? Could be Theon, since Stannis is planning to kill him anyways, but Asha might try to get him free. It could be Bowen Marsh or someone involved in the mutiny, although they'll probably be dealt with long before Stannis makes it back to the wall. It could even be Rickon, if Davos finds him on Skagos. Shireen has Stannis' king's blood, and Rickon has Robb's king's blood. I don't know, let me know what you think. My last ice dragon theory stems from a pretty popular fan theory going back decades now. Some combination of dragons or dragon eggs being found in the Winterfell crypts. In this version, I'm saying that Rhaegar owned a dragon egg, which isn't actually that hard to believe. Aegon V had 7 dragon eggs at Summerhall, the night Rhaegar was born. If any of those survived the fire, Rhaegar might have procured them. Also, he was the Prince of Dragonstone for a long time. He might have just found a crusty old egg beneath the Dragonmont or something. Anywho, Rhaegar gave the egg to Lyanna at the Tower of Joy before he left to eat Robert Baratheon's warhammer on the Trident. And Lyanna gave the egg to Ned in case he ever needs to prove that Jon's a Targaryen. So Ned took the egg, and Jon, back to Winterfell, and he stashed the egg down in the crypts inside Lyanna's tomb, joining all the other dragon's eggs down there. And since this dragon egg will be hatched up north alongside Jon's resurrection in an icy counterpart to Dany's hatching, it will be an ice dragon. In 2018, Deadline reported that the Ice Dragon was going to be adapted into an animated feature film, something like How to Train Your Dragon. 4 years later, in 2022, George said the Ice Dragon movie was still in development, the screenplay to be written by fantasy author David Anthony Durham.
The Ice Dragon. We are going to make that. Warner Brothers Animation has purchased the rights to it, and we're going to expand it to a fully animated film. And David Anthony Durham will be writing the screenplay.
But this little doozy from 2023 hints that the Ice Dragon is probably on the back burner over at Warner Bros. Animation, who seem to be kind of bad at business. I wish these old idiot rich people would simply greenlight this old genius person story because I want the world to see how fit for animation Martin's worlds are. If The Ice Dragon is an animated hit, that's a step in the right direction to get A Song of Ice and Fire adapted properly in the animated format. For the record, I do think a live-action Ice and Fire could be done well, either as a TV show or series of feature films, but the first 2 attempts have not gone very well. Let me know down in the comments which animation style you'd want to see for The Ice Dragon or Game of Thrones. Something like Japanese anime, like Berserk? Something like the Witcher series on Netflix? An artist named Valdir has reimagined A Song of Ice and Fire as an anime, and it looks like a super cool proof of concept. I put a link in the description so you can check their project out. This has been the first Crusader Chris video to appear early on my new Patreon site. Patrons will have access to all of these perks for $5 a month, with more perks to be added in the future. If that sounds good to you, please consider joining. Thanks for watching.